Thank you so much for joining us here at this many-to-many relationships workshop, where we're going to be designing for output. So glad you could be here with us. We know that many-to-many relationships can be hard to visualize and complex to build. So by attending this workshop today, you're going to get the skills to design and build those relationships without any codes. This is a no-code solution area of QuickBase. So we are going to go on to some housekeeping here. Y'all have been using On24, but perhaps you're just joining us and this might be your first session. So real quick, are some navigational tools. You can move the different panels, you can maximize, minimize, and then to drag to resize. I actually found that this drag to resize, you have to be up kind of just on the side here. It doesn't really work so much from this bottom corner. At least that was my experience. Want to direct your attention to this bottom panel. There is an area for attendee chat, which is some non-question stuff. Just want to say hey. Would love if y'all put in your city, state, and an emoji representing the weather. Like, what is the sky doing where you are? Very, very curious about that. So would love to see some engagement there. And then there's a Q&A panel for you to enter some questions, and we will either get to those in real time or during the Q&A session. We are going to be building today, so if you haven't already, please go ahead and get yourself a builder program. It's quick, it's free, it's really simple. It gives you it gives you your own little environment to play and build in. And now on to the stuff. This is me. I'm Chelsea Carpenter. I use she, her pronouns. I work as a process improvement specialist at Portland General Electric, and I am also chair of our Women's Business Resource Group. I know we heard a little bit about business resource groups earlier today if you attended the session. I'm just going to put real quick in the chat a definition. It looks like it got cut off. Let me give you the rest of the definition. There we go. I've been using QuickBase for about 3 years. It is the primary tool of the role that I work in right now. And I want to just tell you a little bit about why I'm leading this session. Beautiful in Florida, big surprise. Thank you for joining us, Carolyn. I'm leading this session because I want to help others get the most out of QuickBase. I love this tool. I'm wearing the old colors of purple. Still need to get some teal into my fashion. But I love it. I love using it. I love helping others learn how to use it. And also I wanted to help increase the representation of women expert users at Empower. So those are the reasons I'm here. And we also have with us, thank you, Sam, for calling it out, Mr. Benjamin Buday. He will be, this is an intermediate course essentially, but maybe you're new to QuickBase. Ben's gonna help me make sure that this session is accessible for everybody. So if I, if I fly over something or say something a little bit too quickly, he'll help slow me down. He's also gonna help assist with the questions to make sure that anything that is good for like right in the moment, if I skipped over something, he'll call those out in the moment or hold them for the Q&A. Ben, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Why, thank you. Thanks for having me here, Chelsea. I'm glad to be a part of this session, and of course, glad to be a part of yet another Empower. But Chelsea's really the star today, so I will sit in the background and I'll chime in anytime you need, Chelsea. So feel free to come to me for any color commentary, or if you notice anything in the chat, or if you happen to notice anything come up in the Q&A and you want me to hop to it and I'm not already hopping to it, happy to do it.
Thanks, Ben. Ben has led sessions on many-to-many relationships, I don't know, countless times. Should we call it countless? So he, fair. So he'll definitely help keep us in line and make sure everything's accurate. Real quick, what are we going to be doing today? We're going to start off with a demonstration. I'm going to show you what is possible with many-to-many relationships. Just, I'm not showing you anything too extravagant. It's a low-key demo. Then we're going to get into our design learning, which is planning for output. We'll do a workshop, and then we'll end with a Q&A. There is a Q&A time here, but again, use that Q&A box for your questions. There's two separate panels for questions and chat, so you might have to open the attendee chat piece to get to that. I think the Q&A is the one that's default open. All righty. What are you going to learn today? First takeaway will be designing for app outputs and not data input. This is really important. It'll help reduce the time that you spend rebuilding redesigning and rebuilding. Words. Second takeaway, a many-to-many requires an intermediary. This may not make sense to you yet, but it will. I'm going to show you how to build a many-to-many relationship, but the key takeaway to that, the whole step-by-step we're going to go through, is that it requires an intermediary. All right, we're going to start off with a demonstration. I'm going to demo an app that I've built and is currently in beta testing. It's going to be used by our business resource groups at QuickBase, or at PGE. Hello, QuickBase on the brain. This app that I'm going to demo is what our workshop app was based off of. So if you find it useful, maybe you can keep it from the exchange and build it out for yourself. The primary purpose of the app is to track the WBRG's metrics of success and the DEI office metrics of success, and to manage our membership. Okay, so there's a video. Olivia, the magician behind the scenes, I believe you're going to assist us with getting the video to play.
I see a little bit of movement there, though. That might just be you.
Yeah, it went forward a little bit. I brought it back. Video should be in slides. I was told to send it separately. This is fun. Okay, so let's see. I can't demo the app because it requires my VPN. So I'm going to grab the video on my computer.
Sounds like if you screen share it, then you'll be able to.
Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna do. Thanks everyone as we figure out technology. All right, here we go, screen share. Okay, so if you enlarge the media player panel on 24, you'll see my screen here. I'll get this demo playing. This is the app that we use for our BRG membership. This is a table of our metrics. Here we have some metrics that are being caught by report, which is super great and what I'm going to be working toward on the other stuff. We have a calendar, which will start getting colored in once we have more BRGs using the app. We have our BRG membership team management here. Going into settings, with a little cog there. I'm going to go into app management and show relationship diagrams to show you what the relationships look like. I'm going to turn off those reference fields. Oh, there we go. Turning off reference fields. Showing you some many-to-many relationships here. We have membership and sessions, meeting at a member registrations intermediary table. Event registrations here, connecting to employees and events. So this is just showing you those many-to-many relationships. I'm going to go back to the home here. These, as I scroll down, quantity of attendees by officers. So those registrations, that intermediary table is where I'm getting this data. This is the result of a many-to-many relationship. Having these pretty little pie charts is only possible because I have many-to-many relationships built into this app. QuickBase is announcing some new tools that'll make this possible through other means, but this is our no-code solution for getting data across two separate apps or two separate tables within one app. All right. We started late, so I'm just going to end that early and go back to our slides. Any questions, anything in the chat that I should be aware of, Ben? We doing good?
So far, so good. Just want to say nice pivot. It was expertly handled.
All right. So we're going to move on to our design lesson. Planning for output. So the first step when thinking about a many-to-many relationship is to get really clear on your app's purpose. So in this example, my app's purpose was metrics. I needed to track metrics by event type. I needed to track metrics by our quantity of members over time, like how many members am I getting each month or each year. Quantity of attendees by officers, so I can show leadership, how their employees are engaging with DE&I efforts. And then membership management. I need members-only events, so things that aren't open to the whole company. And I need a distribution list that I can easily manage. In order to achieve those outputs, we need to have something coming in order to achieve that purpose. Again, there's lots of data out there available. You know, all of your different systems, like we use Workday for our employee data. There's so much data in there, right? But for my purposes of my membership management, I only need a few key inputs from that whole big data set. So in this, again, back to our example, for my metrics, I'm going to need to have a list of our business resource groups. I'm going to need to have a list of employees, but again, I don't need all employee attributes, just a few of them. And I need to have a list of our events. For our members, again, I need that employee information, and I need to have a list of member-only events. I'm going to try a tool in On24 that I haven't seen used yet, but I hope that y'all will engage with me here. There's a pulse check that I just turned on. Let me know if you're with me. Are we feeling good? Thumbs up if you're feeling good on the content so far. I'm hoping it's like at the top of your On24 window, but I haven't seen anyone else use it. Okay, no responses, so maybe it's in a weird place that you guys can't see. Bummer. Okay, well, forget it. I'll just keep feeling good. Thank you, Vincent. Appreciate you. Oh, and a list of the business resource groups that the members are a part of. Okay, so of all our inputs, we need to, thank you, Donald. Of all of our inputs, we need to distill those down into tables. In our last slide, employees was shown a few times, the business resources were shown a few times. So we need to distill those into singular instances to define our tables. So here we go. I'm referring here to member-only events as sessions. And moving forward, these gold boxes are representative of tables, like parent standalone tables. Not necessarily parent, but tables. It'll make sense later. There's another color coming. Okay. Once we have our tables defined, we now need to look at our relationships between them. You might be a new user to QuickBase, so I'm just going to slow down and talk a little bit about this. I'm using an arrow here because Microsoft PowerPoint does not yet have a crow's foot built in. But the crow's foot is the proper demarcation of a relationship. So the arrowhead here is our many side. The nothing on the line side is our parent on the one side. So defining a one-to-many relationship, one event can have many sessions. Hypothetically, we could have one session be applicable to many events, but then you would need to go in and like remove all the registrants and rename it and reuse it. I recycle and reuse at home. I don't need to with my QuickBase app. It's a lot easier to just have a one-to-many and just keep creating sessions as the events go on. So yes, Lucidchart does have the crow's foot demarcation. Highly recommend using Lucidchart when planning out your app. Thank you for that, Michael. Okay, so one-to-many. Any questions, looking around for any questions on one-to-many? Don't see any. Going to move on to our many-to-many. All right, looking at employees and business resource groups. One employee can join many BRGs. They can be in the women's business resource group, the veterans, the Latin American business resource group, and the business resource groups can have many employees in them. So is that a many to many? One line with two crow's feet? Hard no, not how we draw it. And the reason is because behind the scenes, when you're actually in QuickBase making these relationships, you're making two. You're telling the system that business resource groups is the parent table, which is what we call the one side of a one-to-many relationship, is the parent table to an employee table, and that the employees are the parent to the business resource group. I have a 6-month-old puppy. She thinks she's the boss. I think I'm the boss. I don't need that kind of drama in my app. So we're just, again, hard no. This is not what we do. and I encourage you, don't believe me. Try it out. You've made yourself a builder program account. I don't know why that word was gone from my vocabulary for a hot second. But you have a builder program account. You can build whatever you want, and you can try to break all the rules. Break them. See what happens. Don't trust me. It's fine. But at the end of the day, there might be a use for it. And I can't imagine it. But for all of my real life uses, this creates double work. It creates, like, I would have to add employees to the business resource groups. And then on the employee record, I would have to add the business resource groups back to the employee because no one knows which one's boss. So don't recommend it. Okay, so what do? New color, it's a teal, it's an intermediary table. This is takeaway number 2. A many-to-many requires an intermediary. Here now we have 2 one-to-many relationships meeting at an intermediary table, and that intermediary table has the data from both of them, so it is housing this many-to-many relationship. When you look at the 2 parent table, or the 2 tables that are trying to be parents of each other, you can typically find a noun that sits nicely in between the 2. In this case, when an employee joins a business resource group, they have a membership. Okay, looking at the chat. Puppies are always boss, that's right. Okay, so any questions? Not seeing any questions. I must be doing an exceptional job, or y'all are feeling shy, and or, could be both. I'm just gonna put in a plug for asking questions. I learned this when I was training in kickboxing, that if I'm not fully engaged and like asking the questions and participating fully, then the people that are learning with me aren't getting the most out of that session. So the way that you ask a question might trigger me to say something in a way that turns on the light bulb for someone else. So if you have a question and you're feeling shy, I highly encourage you to go ahead and use our Q&A or use the chat. You will get that answered. Okay. All right, moving on. Getting into our design workshop already, y'all. We are cruising. Okay, this is the part where you get to download Chelsea's first app on the Exchange. You're gonna go into here. You're gonna go into your Builder account, and in the lower right, there's a link for the Exchange. Or if you're on a corporate account, there's a link in the upper right to explore sample apps. And from there, you're going to type in, I was just typing in Empower '21, but there could have been more apps published since then. You could type in my name. You could type, the name of it is here, Many-to-Many Event Metric Sample App. I'm going to give you all a moment. I'm actually going to go download it myself. Here, I'm going to share my screen while I download it, just in case that's helpful for anybody that might be new to the system. And just click that plus sign, get this app. You can rename it if you want. Click create. Okay. So what are we going to do now that we have our app? Again, use the chat, speak up if you need me to slow down a little bit, or, you know, just say some things and make some jokes while you catch up with us. No problem. Ben can help me out here. But what we're going to be working on while y'all download your app is we're going to be building out the rest of our relationship. I have an arrow missing. We have our arrow here. What happens? So the relationships we have yet to build is that many employees can attend many events. Many members can attend many sessions. And one group can host many events. Again, apologies. There's a phantom relationship here that we already talked about and got built. I see some stuff coming in on the Q&A. Anything I should slow down for, Ben?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention, just because I've seen a few questions come in that all talk about this, which is the nature of the intermediary table, or as the most recent question that Marissa asked was stated, what's the best way to explain this many-to-many relationship to those who might not be builders? And the one response that I would have that you and I talked about in recent weeks is, one way to describe a many-to-many relationship for me is it's kind of like tracking receipts. So I live right near a shopping center. If I go and shop at a store, if I, a customer, shop at a store, I get a receipt when I'm done. And on that receipt is just what I did at the store at that time. It's proof that I went to that store and made a purchase. A lot of many-to-many examples are just receipts of an employee belonging to a group, or an employee attending a session, or an event having a session. And so that's all just to say that depending on why you're building a many-to-many relationship, that might be a sensible explanation, or maybe that doesn't exactly cover it. But just wanted to mention that that's come up in the Q&A a little bit, is like, what's a layman's way of describing why many-to-manys come up? And that was my interpretation.
Yeah, there's so many great examples out there about many-to-many relationships. In your example of the receipts, I can see many relationships. Your one store produces many receipts. You have one product that's purchased by many customers. You are one customer that goes to the store multiple times, so you receive multiple receipts. There's many to manys in there. But some more common ones are like one student will be in many classes, and one class will have many students in it. But between the two are registrations, right? You're signing up for a class, or one teacher has many students, or one student has a lot of homework, and that one homework assignment can be assigned to many students. And I just said the word assign. It's an assignment that sits between the two.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, so I feel like really drawing it out, getting clear on what you're wanting to achieve with your app. And sometimes what you're wanting to achieve with your app isn't necessarily an output, a tangible output, such as a report. Sometimes it can be a particular function. You want somebody to be able to do something a lot easier than they're doing it today. Maybe they're using Word or Excel, which are like the equivalent of paper these days. Maybe there's manual or human steps in between things that you could automate. So those are all outputs of your app. So it's really important to get clear on what you want your app to do, and then trace back to see what amount of information do I need. Do I need all of the receipts? Do I need all of the I don't know how to say, all of the available
like the
data
metadata?
out there? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question that came in too, which is, does the intermediary table have to does it need all the data from both tables? And the answer is, it doesn't have to. It's just in the eye of the beholder. There are some intermediary tables out there that actually don't have any
days. Yeah.
It's just references to the parents. And I think I'm maybe spoiling what's coming up, but sometimes the intermediary table, sometimes the join table, as some people call it, doesn't really have a tangible place in reality or a sensible name. So you might have something like projects and team members. So what would a join record be called if you were trying to relate many projects to many team members? Assigned team members, assignments. You might not always have a reasonable noun that you use in your current process to describe that, but other times you will. And so for the purposes of explaining this in layperson terms, I would say think about examples in the real world that you feel comfortable speaking to. So Chelsea had mentioned students registering for courses having many students registered. One I like to think about, I'm pretty sure a lot of us have done at least one round of online shopping. If you think about when you are, one day you will. If you think about purchasing things online, there's probably a products table, an orders table or cart or whatever, and then a line items table, right? Because if you and I buy the same chair, they don't want to have to continue to create the same record over and over. We're going to reference it by creating a line item, buying a specimen of that chair. So that's all I have to say there. Hopefully that's helpful.
And I think to that question about what goes on the intermediary table, that comes down to how it's going to be used. So I have some intermediary tables, like Ben said, that don't have any information. It's just there to create the relationship. And then I use lookup and summarize fields to pull the data from the child record into the parents. Or I have tables where you sign up. You sign up for a BRG through the membership table. And so, oh my goodness, this light is distracting me. Sorry, y'all. Technology again. So you would sign up on the memberships table, which would be an intermediary table. So it's actually getting data from references from the employees and the groups, and it might have some additional fields. Nope, it doesn't want to work. It might have some additional fields asking for more information. Like, do you want to volunteer on the BRG? Are you interested in a leadership position in the future? So it really just depends on how you're going to drive the user experience. Okay. So let's go ahead and work on our design workshop. I'm going to get over to our next slide with our building instructions. So we're going to add an intermediary table by clicking, I'm going to go over the steps and then I'll share my screen and we'll do it together. We're going to click the new table icon and then we're going to select from scratch and our new table window is going to open. Waiting for the shares to go live for you. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to click on my new table, little plus button here, and I'm going to select from scratch. And my new table window opens. Now I'm going to populate the fields and select an icon. So our table name is going to be event registration. And then a single record is going to be an event registration. So depending on how, again, back to the user experience, when it comes to icons and what you want to use for your intermediary table, what my practice is typically, if no one's going to be using it, if it's just going to be there to create the connection between the two tables, I will use this icon. You can choose whichever one you like. But for me, it helps me know, like, at a glance, what's the purpose of this table. If the users are going to be entering data into it or using it as like a sign up form, I might use another, like a little cute icon, or not cute, business appropriate, for whatever that purpose is. That's representative with the purpose of that intermediary table. Best practice would be to create a description. We're just doing this as demo. All right, we clicked that create button, a pop-up closed, and we now have our add new field pop-up open. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. We're not going to create any additional fields for this intermediary table. Okay, so now we have our intermediary table and we need to add our relationships. So from the screen here, I have my yellow icons on the left. We can go ahead and click table to table relationships. Again, if I'm going too fast, please use the chat. I do have my eyes on it. I'm going to click the blue plus new relationship button in the upper right, and a create a table to table relationship window will open. Event registrations is going to connect to employees. And we're going to select the option where one employee can have many registrations. They can attend, they can register for many events. We're going to add some lookup values. Got the employee name here. It'll get the officer last name. You're seeing a little sneak peek into how Chelsea names her fields. Happy to chat offline about that. At me in the Slack, and I can tell you all about the mayhem or the madness behind this naming convention. We're going to go ahead and click create relationship, and the pop-up will close. All right, we now have our relationship here. If you are the type of person that names your fields in a particular ways, you might opt to rename your fields at this stage. I typically do. The real quick explanation is that I like to know, it leaves a breadcrumb for me of which tables a field has come from. So that's where you would do that if you wanted to rename your field. Now we're just going to rinse and repeat. We're going to repeat steps 1 and 2 above and create events as the parent table. So we're going to click the blue plus new relationship sign. Stacy, yes. Stacy, can you use the attendee chat and tell me which step we zoomed past for you? Was it the creating the relationship? You have the intermediary table created. Okay. Yes, you have the intermediary table created. Perfect. We're going to go ahead and click plus new relationship, the blue button in the upper right corner. We are in the settings of the event registrations table in the table to table relationships area. And we're going to click the plus new relationship button in the upper right. Our intermediary is a child of both of the other two tables that we wanted to connect through a many-to-many relationship. And those two tables were employees, which we just did, and events. So I'm going to select events here. So event registrations connects to events, and one event can have many event registrants. We're going to click next. And now it's asking us to pull in some lookup fields. So the child table event registration is going to look up to its parent table events, and it can pull down some fields so that there's something on the form. Remember, we didn't create any fields on our event registrations table. So the only fields that will be there will actually come from the parent record, from the parent tables, employees, and events. So we might add events title. We might want the start date, description. You decide. Again, it depends on how you're going to be using your intermediary table. But once you have some lookup fields, we're going to click the blue Create Relationship button. And now we have our second relationship. feel free to let me know if I'm now going too slow. And again, if you wanted to edit the fields that are pertaining to a relationship, you could do that in the fields section. You could also do that in the table-to-table relationship section of the settings by clicking on the relationship itself. And here it'll tell you on events, it is pulling the event record ID number is being used as a key field. Event registrations, these are actually the two fields that are created with when the relationship is built. It adds a report link, which you can use either as like a drop-down lookup, or it can display a report of related child records. And then it also creates a URL formula field. That's a button that lets you click it to add a child record. And then these are the lookup fields that we created when we were establishing the relationship, but perhaps we did that and we realized we want the users to use the table differently, or we need other fields in order to do a formula or something fancy like that. You could, or for whatever reason you want, you could add additional lookup fields here. If you want to see what it looks like, you would, we're already in the settings. You can open this drop down and actually pop over to the app settings by clicking this top one with the cube. It'll always be a cube. Go into app management and click show relationship diagram. I always turn off the reference fields. It clutters things. And then every time you hover over one of these, this big pop-up will open. I usually pull it out of the way. And then whenever a new one opens, it'll open down there. So this is our new fancy-dancy intermediary table we just created. It's sitting between events and employees. I'm going to pop over to another slide. So you can see here with our, this is going to be the finished version after we finish our workshop of what we're aiming for. So one employee can attend many events. All right. Chat pulse check, because the pulse check itself wasn't working for us. Let me know if we're good. If we want to see it again, or should I leave the session registrations for you? I have some more design stuff we could talk about. How you feeling? Want to see it again? Want to see the whole thing again? Good, feeling good. How do you get to the relationship diagram? Yeah, let me show that to you again. So here I'm at the home screen. I'm on the default dashboard. You can get to it a lot of different ways, but if you click the cog, it'll take you to the settings. And when you're in settings, you have this drop-down list. Let me wait for the screen share to catch up. I apologize for the lag. And you can navigate between your personal settings, the app settings as a whole. Again, it has this cube icon on it. And you can also pop over to any of your tables. So if you're in settings and you need to navigate over to a different table, you don't have to exit settings, go to the table, hit settings, and get into it again. You can just navigate through this drop-down. Yeah, bonus points. Ching. Okay, so once we're in our in the app settings, which is the cube icon, we're going to go to app management. It's on the far right, and it's the top option. It has a little clipboard with a checkbox. We're going to click that friend. And then in the top section, it says show app info is the top section. There's 3 options there. The bottom option is show relationship diagram. And each time you go to it, it puts stuff in its own little place. Again, you can move this friend by dragging it out of the way. So one option that we have, which is really nice, is you can organize it how you'd like to see it, how it makes sense to your mind, and then you can click Save this layout. So the next time that you go there, it'll look the same. Okay. So I'm not seeing any requests to repeat the full process of creating an intermediary table and then adding the relationships. Is that correct, my friend? Okay, cool. We're going to go over another aspect, which is the user experience. So there's some design considerations that you should keep in mind when you create a many-to-many relationship. QuickBase is going to, make some suggestions for you, and auto created those two fields that I showed you, the report link and the add button. There's some other stuff that it does as well. So if I go over to my event registration and click new event registration, my naming conventions. On the parent table form, sorry. Let's start with the parent tables. So on the employees table, there's some sample data in there for you. When we look at our employee, we now have this event registration section. You've watched me this whole time. I didn't create that. That wasn't in there. Just by adding the relationship, it added the section, it added my add button, and it added the report link. So maybe you like it. You're like, yeah, that's exactly how I want it to look. Or maybe you're going to create a whole bunch of child relationships. You can do things like, sorry, that was fast. Slow down. So when I'm looking at an employee record, I can click in the upper right, the wrench that says customize this form. Donald, you're right. The native builder has arrowheads rather than crow's feet, just like Microsoft PowerPoint. Interesting. Okay. So we're in the form builder, and I'm clicked on the section heading for event registration. We have the option to just collapse this whole section by default. So if you want to save space so that all the child record stuff aren't visible at the same time, you can collapse them. On the event registration button, you can go to the properties here, and you can expand that. The properties is in the upper right corner. And you can change things like the text on the button. Maybe the button's too long, you don't want it to say all those words. You can also change the color of the button if you wanted to. You also can do the RGB or hex if you have those items, or if you have those codes for maybe your company's brand colors. So that's just in the panel for the add event registration field in the properties button. It's just one way to get to it. You could go to settings field, click on it, and then go to properties. Event registrations, here is the report link field that I was talking about before. You can change whether it's a record picker, and usually on the parent, you want to display a report of all the child records. And it'll auto create this embedded for employees report that admins of the app can see. Other users won't be able to, when they go to look at reports in your table, they won't see this report, but the admin will. Special superpowers. And you can change those settings either by going to settings, reports, and clicking on it as an admin, or you can also change it here by clicking change settings. And this brings you to the report builder. So you can customize what columns are seen. You can filter, so maybe you only want to see child records that are in the current year. You can sort and group. And You can also, when you save or display, we have our fancy new-ish, last year new feature of changing the column properties. So you can change the name, the field name as it appears on that report. And it'll give you this green flag here reminding you that you've made changes and that you'll need to save the report in order for it to take hold. Okay, I'm going to close that. I'm going to save my form. I have my pink button. Change the column name on this name column. Another way to customize, if you want to save space, you could use the same row column to move the report up onto the same row as your button. It's up to you. You're the one customizing. You can decide. Okay, so that is the features that are auto-added to a parent form when you create a child relationship, or a relationship that, yeah, child relationship, a one-to-many relationship. Ben, anything to add before I move on to the child table form?
Nothing quite yet. I could think of a bunch of small things I'd love to geek out over, but I think you're going to be doing some of that in a little bit. And we only have so much time. So, well, we have like 45 minutes, but yeah, keep on keeping on.
Okay, if I don't get to these things you want to talk about, please speak up.
I might just do that, but yeah. I think you're heading in a great direction, so keep it up.
All righty. I love this positive teamwork. Okay. So on the child table form, so I'm navigating to my child table, which is the intermediary. And I'm going to click the blue plus new event registration button to look at what that form looks like. And again, so QuickBase, we auto-added these things. We first related our intermediary table to employees. So you'll see that these employees fields we are the top two, and then we related it to events. So following that are our events fields. And it just threw them in there. This is the field name, the raw field name. It assumed, there's another thing, it assumed that our proxy field, I'll get into this, should be the first lookup field that we selected. I'm going to pause and actually go into that a little bit. So I'm going to right click on the employee name field title, and I'm going to select from the drop down that opens the edit field properties for this. No, I'm not. I apologize. I'm going to go to settings. That's not where I want to go. Okay. I want to go to the related employee field. So I went to settings, I selected fields, and I'm going to click on related employee. Okay, so you'll see down here, we have some reference field options. So you can decide whether or not you want the end user to be able to click the value that's on the in-between table, the intermediary table that is like referencing the related employee. So Chelsea is a member of the WBRG. Should Chelsea's name be a hyperlink that I can then go and look at Chelsea's employee record? Yes or no? You get to decide by using this checkbox. Use the record picker instead of a drop-down menu for grid edit. I've never selected that, but you might have a use for it. And then proxy field. And underneath it has its definition. Show values from this field instead of the related table's key field. So Chelsea, the employee, has an employee number, which is what I made as the key field in the employees table, rather than a record ID being the key field, because I only want, I want each employee to have a unique employee number. So do I want the field to display my employee number, or do I want it to display my some other attribute of my employee record? And I want it to display my name, so this is valid. But just know that when you set up the relationship, the first field that you select on the lookup, when you're establishing the relationship, the QuickBase will assume is the one that you want to be your proxy field, but you can change it later. Any questions there? I was a little bit off script. Also, I didn't practice this piece, so let me know. To import data, it's a really good question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I hopped in to answer that briefly there. There was a question about importing data into the intermediary table and how to do that. And there's a lot of ways to answer it. One thing that I mentioned is that it's critical to make sure the reference fields, which you just pointed out, the reference fields, in this case, like the employee name and the title of the event, are in your spreadsheet, whatever the key fields are of the parent tables.
Yeah. Let's pin this and go over it in the Q&A because I have some other tips as well. Okay. So we're on our child record form. It doesn't give us any headers or anything like that. So it just puts the field title to the left, which you can change when you have a section header. So if you don't actually have a name for your section header or you don't want to add any more text to your form, you can leave it blank. That's totally fine. You can put a section header with no content in and just make the selections here of whether you want it collapsed or, which would be weird with no title. But if you want the labels to be above the fields, and this is where you would also set up the same with what fields you want to appear on the same row as one another. I believe, Ben, you have a rule or a shorthand that you say 4 is your max on one row. Is that correct? Did I pick that up right?
Typically, yeah, just to satisfy all types of monitors, I tend not to put more than 4 on a given row, and I usually put the labels above just to make that a bit cleaner. But that's just a preference, certainly not a best practice or anything.
Yeah, I feel like you have to be mindful too of how the form displays in view mode versus edit mode. So it may be that in view mode, everything's like really, I have this in my app, everything's backwards. Everything may scoot over to the side when it's in view mode, but in edit mode, if it's a record picker like this, they can be pretty long. So it'll actually push things out. And that's what you really care about is like the user experience of entering the data. Do they have to like scroll their screen over to the side? So I think it is good to be mindful of how many fields display on a single row. In Customize This Form, you can also change the alternate label. You can add an alternate label. So if you're like me and you do like a breadcrumb field name, you could rename the fields on the forms and in reports manually. Okay, so the record picker, it just decided for me like what it's going to show here, the employee name and then the department ID with name, and then on the events it's showing me the event title and the start date. But it's not set in stone. Again, going to that little wrench, customized form. On the name field, it's my proxy field. And it says, when used for data entry, use the default record picker. You can change those settings. It's very nice. I don't know why these always open small. And you can change which fields show up in the record picker. And you'll notice I didn't add all these fields as lookup fields. It's just going right to the parent table and showing me all the fields that are available. So that's also really nice. And you can up to 3 on the default record picker. And the first one will be the one that displays when you make a selection and then move to the next field. It'll display as whatever you put as your first field selection here in the record picker. So even if your proxy field is employee name, if I put employee ID here, in edit mode, when they tab away, it'll show the employee ID. And then when you look at it in view mode, it'll show the name, I believe. That piece is you have to play with. That has caught me up a few times. But it lets you preview before you save. That is how you customize your default record picker. Apologies, checking the chat. Okay.
If I may, Chelsea, one thing I want to
please.
mention here, based on a question that came up earlier, is, okay, but what if you needed to do something like filter out employees that are no longer with the organization? Or you needed to filter out employees that have already been joined to a certain event or group or something. Like, the record picker here doesn't do that for you. So what is the solution? And of course, I know one of the solutions, but if you wanted to speak to it too, of course, you'd be great at that as well.
Let's compare solutions. So what I do, I'd love to hear what you do then, because I compare this to me learning how to play piano on my own using building in QuickBase. I build by necessity, and I've taught myself, so I'd love to hear if you have a different way of doing this. Most of my forms have an admin section that I hide from viewers, and in there I'll create conditional filter fields. So if I need only active employees, for example, I would create an admin field that says that maybe is a text field, and the default text is active. So whenever I open this form, there's already a field there that says active. And why I do that, let's go to our settings. I'm going to click on fields, second down on the left, looks like a little computer. I'm going to go to related employee. So this is our primary relationship field. And in our reference field options, I stopped short. We talked about the proxy field, and we did not talk about the conditional values option that we have here. So when you select this checkbox, you can compare two fields. So if there's an employee status field that says active or inactive, and I now have my admin field that defaults with the value of active, I can say when employee status is the same as my admin status field, that's the options that I want to see. Those are the only ones I want to see. I don't want to see anything else.
Clever. Okay.
Another way I've done this or another way I've leveraged the same technique is if somebody makes a selection such as, so I have another app where I do department management, and we have available, unavailable, active, and inactive departments. And say somebody wants to submit a change request to deactivate a department. When they'll make a selection saying that this request is to close department, and I have a rule that says when request type equals closed department, populate my admin status field with active. If they want to open a new department, if request type equals open department, populate my admin status field with available. And that way, the conditional value will change based on how they respond to the form. It is limited to two fields, so I have done things where I've concatenated into my conditional filter field in order to conditionally filter by multiple selections. So I want it to be an active department in whatever organization, for example, and maybe they made two different selections on the form, and then I have an admin formula field that concatenates the two. But then you need to have a value that matches on both tables. That's probably too advanced. Ben, how do you solve this?
Well, I like my cooking analogies when it comes to QuickBase. I feel like we're comparing recipes. So I definitely see where you're going with that. The way that I do it is different, but I think it achieves something similar. So if you bring us back to that event registration form, one thing that you might want to do is say, I don't want employees to be able to register for past events. And maybe if someone is doing this as an administrator, I don't want you registering employees that are no longer with this group or they've moved on. So those drop downs there refer to your record pickers right now, which just shows every record from those tables. But if you go to customize the form, what builders here may or may not know is that when you're on a form and you have those reference fields like the employee name or a reference proxy, it's all the same. If you notice, there's a section in the center there that says when used for data entry, use the default record picker. What you could do is you could swap that out for a report on your employees table And based on the filtering that that report is doing, you can have this dropdown now basically get its cues from said report. So if you had something called like active employees that only showed employees that are, let's say, checked as active using a checkbox, you would only see the ones based on that filter. Or if you had an events report that says, let's say it uses a filter to only show events that occur today or in the future, you could then go customize this form and say, hey, events title dropdown, you're going to look at this report because I only want you picking events that happen in the future, right? There's going to be plenty of events in the past, but only a handful in the future. And that's something that my team of trainers uses. So when we need to assign a trainer, we've got hundreds of events that happened in the past. We don't need to see all of those in the dropdown. We just need to see the future ones. So that's what we do there. And that's what I would do.
I love that. I've never messed with that. I just learned, that was my like happy I'm learning something new, Dan. Love it. Thank you. If anyone else has other solutions, I'd love to see it in the attendee chat. Cool. Well, I don't even know where I was. I'm so excited. Okay, role management. Okay. Earlier when I was talking about the icons and like what your user experience will be with, like, in terms of engagement with the intermediary table, like maybe they won't engage with it at all, and they don't need to see it, or like, so we might play with our table visibility. We also might want to look at navigation. That I'm going to have you speak to that because I copied this from your slide and I'm not 100% where you're going with that. And then also look at which tables should have grid edit enabled. So this is all in role management. So I'm going to go over to the users icon here. It's the second from the left. Looks like a little person, little meeple. And I'm going to click manage roles. That's just one way to get there. Of course, there's a million ways to do things in QuickBase. And we have our roles here. I'm going to go ahead and just pick the viewer role. And we have some tabs here at the top. It lands us in the permissions tab. And this is, I don't know if anyone else runs into this, but if you're zoomed in too much, you can't actually see the bottom. Okay, that works. If you have to like hold the scroll bar down to the side. So we have our event registrations here. Maybe like, should viewers even see those records? Should viewers be able to modify them, or is that just an admin function? Or maybe they should look at defaulted my viewers to say, no, they can't modify. And I want them to, because I want them to manage their own registration. Maybe they decide they don't want to register later. I don't know. Maybe I want them to be able to add their own registration so that an admin has them do that for them. This is where you would edit those things. I'm not going to get into custom roles, but there are some custom role features in this table access as well. On the user interface, you get to decide whether or not users see the table. Maybe you want to hide it from them in the table bar. You would use this little checkbox. Maybe you don't want them to be able to add or import. Maybe you don't want them to be able to grid edit. You could hide the multi-record options, which I find it funny that is that what all that they need then? QuickBase question. I've always read hide multi-record options as grid edit. Like, do I hide?
You read it right.
Okay.
Yep, that's grid edit. Also, when you set an embedded report to be editable on a form, so that when you edit a parent record, the embedded report goes into grid edit mode. It's the same idea.
Cool. Okay. Cool. So that's where you would hide their table. Like, you would manage the table of visibility and the grid edit. Ben, what do you want to say about navigation here in role management?
Nothing too revolutionary. I think I just try to keep in mind the hide in table bar down below, as well as the hide add button in links. Those two first columns there. When you think about something like the event registrations, you might want to think about this role and say, does that role really need to go directly to that join tables landing page? Does that do anything for them? And you've hidden it, right? Mm-hmm. So I would just reiterate that it's good to think through all the roles and figure out what you can take away. Maybe you do need them to land on the table, but you don't want them adding records directly from that table's landing page. And that's what that second column to hide the add button and links is for. So nothing really. Maybe one other thing I guess I could mention is when it comes to the story of employees signing up for something like sessions or events, where do they start? Do they start from the employees table? Do they start from the events table? You might find that you actually hide more tables than you think you need to because you can use pages, dashboards, and you can use fewer tables to navigate around. So just something to keep in mind.
You could do these quick links widget, the search bar widget. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do what I can to try and hide as many tables as I can from folks. Not for like any kind of like greed or opacity reasons, opposite of transparency, but just to make it easier for them to reduce the visual noise. Some of my apps have tables that, keep going all the way to the side and I have to scroll to get to them. I don't want my users to have to scroll to get to the table they need, so I try to hide what I can from them.
Exactly. And you might think, well, an employee should be able to see their own records, so let's show them the employees table. But all the same, if there's a user field on your employees table, you can always show a report, put it on a homepage or one of the upcoming dashboards that just says, show the person logged in their own employee record, and boom, that's all you need. They don't need to see the employees table itself.
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to work at a place that has licenses for everyone. I don't. I have to do a lot of workarounds to get people the data they need without user licenses. And to hide all the information I need to, because it's true, user roles allow you to just like hide so easily. Anyway, user license envy. All right, moving along. I showed this slide earlier. This is your end goal for your design workshop. Again, we left this item here, the session registration, which is an child of an intermediary and session. So that only members can attend the sessions. I'm going to leave that to you to do on your own time. And if you run into any issues with it, feel free to, mention or direct message me or Ben in Slack, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. All right, so I'm just going to review our key takeaways and let me stop sharing. Just going to review our key takeaways, and I just really want y'all to let me know if we didn't get to any of these or if it didn't fully sink in. We're designing for app output rather than data input. So what reports do you need? What functionality? What information do you want a user to get right when they log into it and are looking at their dashboard? Or what information should an automated email send them? Those are your outputs. It could be a functionality. It could be an automation. But what do you want your app to do? And then when you're building, a many-to-many requires an intermediary. No relationship going both ways between the two unless you have some unique special circumstance that may exist in the world. But you'll notice that QuickBase doesn't offer it as an option when you click to add a relationship between two tables. It's not it's not natively offered for a reason. Right, Ben? You're making a face. Are you looking at something else?
No, you were. I'm typing into the attendee chat.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, am I making a face?
So,
no, I'm completely in agreement with that. I'm just feverishly typing an answer, trying to describe something. That's probably my explanation face.
Okay, cool. We're gonna pop into the Q&A. Speaking of questions, and I know this sweet slide has been shown in just about every session I've attended, but maybe this is your first today. There is a Slack channel for Empower 2021 sessions. So feel free to hop in there if you have any follow-up questions. And
could we hop into one thing afterwards? I want to take like the first crack at answering a question with you.
Hop in. We're in the Q&A session. Let's go.
I just got super excited. So this came up, and I'm not exactly positive that I have the answer that everyone wants here, but there was talk about grid edit and the idea of filtering those reference fields, basically. So we had talked about the two different ways that we do it, and I showed, or well, had you kind of demonstrate that you can take something like a future or upcoming events report, and when you're picking from the events dropdown, only reference what's on that report. Now, I do believe that you can tell a table that when in grid edit mode, get your references from a certain form. It won't honor the form rules, but it will honor things like what the reference fields are being told to display. So I was curious if you wanted to share your screen for a moment, and we could take a quick look at the event registrations table, and I could describe exactly what I'm thinking of here.
Yeah, you're going to have to, I'm a tactile learner, so you're going to have to break that down for me a little bit more. And then don't let me forget about the import question for the intermediary table. So I do have an answer for that.
So if you go into your settings here and you go to your forms, I believe you have just one form.
Correct.
But we'll take a look. And so you have one form, right? Now, if you have more than one form, this is kind of a means to an end, but let's say you just copy that form, and we'll talk about why in a moment. There's now a setting below that says, set how different roles use these forms. And when you expand that, one of the columns that you can adjust, it's just peeking out from the right, is grid edit. So you can say that for any role or all roles, when someone is grid editing on this event registrations table, the behavior for what they should be able to do will first be limited by what the forms are being told to do. So my thought is, if on this registrations form, you tell the events reference field to refer to a report of upcoming events, and then you come here and say, hey, grid edit, get your cues from that form. What that will do is when you're grid editing and saying, I need to register a bunch of people for events, the event reference field will filter based on said report and only show upcoming events. That was a bunch of jargon. Did that make any sense?
It made sense to me. So I'm going to rephrase it just for the good of the order. So I've done the work on my form to limit a record picker to reference another report that says, just show me some conditionally filtered report. I only want to see future events in this example.
Yeah.
But then when I leave that form and I go back to the table and I'm, looking at the registrants, the list of registrants, and I have the, option to add some more at the bottom when I'm in grid edit. If I were to open the event record picker then in the grid edit mode, it would show me all events. It's not filtered the way that the form is filtered. But if I turn this feature on and say in grid edit, reference the behavior of the fields that are on the form, then when I'm in that table mode in grid edit, it'll only show me future events. So I don't have to duplicate the work of my form in any way. I can just leverage it to the grid edit behavior.
That's yes, absolutely. Cool. That is a perfect reiteration of what I believe is how it works. So a bunch of people said thank you. I would encourage you to try it. I'm pretty sure it's been a while since I've done that. I do think that we have some other QuickBase employees in the attendee group here, as well as some prior QuickBase employees. So please feel free to come over the top and say, actually, if that's not the case. But I believe, used that in the past.
Cool. All right.
So thank you for that.
2 new learnings in my hat. I love that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. You can be working on QuickBase for years and learn new things. I'm celebrating my 8th year next month, and I still learn stuff on a weekly basis. But you wanted to get to importing questions.
Yes. Okay, so session, I showed you in our little map, is an intermediary table. And P.S., there's some little Easter eggs in this app, such as this registration is field. If you go into the properties, you'll see more information about how to get it to work, to say registration is open or closed. If you expand reports and charts on the sessions table, you'll see that there is a report here called sessions-for import. So the only reason event title is actually here is so that the person that pulls out this report knows what event 5 is, but I typically have them, before import, or not actually, they don't delete it because of the data mapping in QuickBase, which is so wonderful. So the headers are the field names, unedited, and I just have the fields that I need in order to create new sessions related to an event. So typically I'll create the event first and add one person to it, or add one session to it, and then I'll pop over here and it'll show up, and then I can just create the new sessions in Excel and upload. If we have time, I can show that if people are interested, but there might be other questions that we want to get to. And maybe you have some time. Okay.
There are a few other questions that came up that I think we could answer quickly as well.
Okay. All right. So I have a bunch of events already here. I'm going to grab one and just add a session. Can I? Yeah, I'm going to add a session to it. Go back over to sessions, open reports and charts, select sessions for import. And now I see my Tech Talk SharePoint has a group 1. Okay, so I'm going to download this report as a CSV. You could also filter this, like maybe I don't want to have anything to do with this other event. You could filter it as well. So I'm just going to delete those for now. And then this is the event that I want to replicate. So I'm going to create maybe I want 5 sessions total. I'm just going to go ahead and copy down the event related and the session capacity, and I'm going to delete the top row so I don't recreate group 1. Save that, my session 3. Now I'm going to go back to the sessions table homepage. Open up the more actions, select import, export. We're recording this. I'm going a little fast, but you can get it on the on-demand. I'm going to import into a table from a file, skip down to choose file, select my session 3, import from file. It's smart enough to know not to bring in that empty column. And here it's already mapped to the event-related session title and session capacity. It got that my first row is the field name. And then I can click import. Let's go back to sessions. I'm going to sort by event title. And now we can see my 5 sessions associated with the Tech Talk. Less than a minute, y'all. Boom. Okay, ask me another. Let's do another question.
One question that came up was the idea of a one-to-one relationship. And another attendee had answered that, yeah, it's possible. And there are a few different ways to set that up. Ultimately, you're always, for now, creating one-to-many relationships and then just augmenting your app. One of the ways that I know to create a one-to-one relationship is essentially removing the add button or removing the workflow possibilities for adding more than one. And there are a couple ways to do that. Some of it depends on if you have a user field or not. So we may or may not be able to show that, but essentially all of the add child record buttons are formula fields. And like any formula field, you can set a condition in the formula to say, if we see something present in the data, don't show anything. So this add session button, for example, if we wanted to hide it just because there's one session added for, let's say, a given user, you could introduce an if statement up front to say, if we see that there's already a reason to not show this button, don't show it. And you don't have to go to the lengths to, start keying that in or anything like that. But if I wanted to, let's say, limit it so that I can't sign up for more than one employee training session, I can't register for the same session twice. I could create a summary field that says, hey, look, for this user, summarize if they've already signed up for a given session. And then I could inject that into this formula here to say the button disappears if you've already signed up. That's a really, really oversimplified way of describing it, but there are ways to do it. It just depends on what is the nature of the one-to-one relationship.
Cool. My brain was going into like, again, user and license envy. But I'm trying, yeah. We were talking yesterday about how when we attend these sessions, half our brain is in like, how do I use this? And the other is like, oh, pay attention on tactical. How do I do it? Okay. Other questions?
Something just came in. If there's time, can we show how to pull just active employees using Ben's method? Our company uses the method that Chelsea uses, but the embedded report forces that new field to display, which confuses the user sometimes. I mean, I think we could do that pretty quickly, actually. What we would need to do is either add or confirm that it already exists, a field on the, where you're going, employees table, to see if there's like a active or not.
I do not.
Field. Okay, so maybe, I guess the easiest way would be to like add a checkbox for inactive or something. That way we only have to check one person's record. Whatever you want to do, really, it doesn't matter. And then we could say, all right, we signify if an employee is active or not by checking that box. And there's a lot we could do if we were to actually use this in real life. We could default it to being checked every time you add a new employee or whatever, but I think it's the final one down at the bottom there. You're going to move it up. Nice.
Thank you.
Yep, it's in spot 14. So, okay. So in this case, we're kind of pretending that Olivia is the only active employee right now. The next thing that Chelsea would do is create a report to only show employees where that active checkbox is checked. And again, this could be any field or set of fields that you're filtering off. It doesn't have to be simply a checkbox, but we would say filter employees. Yep. And the columns that you choose here are what will appear. Doesn't really matter what you pick, but if you just want to pick a couple, Chelsea, like employee name and maybe just the active checkbox to prove that we're not making this up, you could always add that in as well. And the final thing I would do is just name the report like active employees, just so that we can see it when we're picking it later. With more time, of course, we'd add a description, maybe put the date and time that we created it, blah, 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 but hit save. We don't have that much time. So now with this report of employees filtering only active employees, we see Olivia there, right? So then, yeah, Chelsea knows where she's going. To the event registrations table she goes. There are, I guess, technically two forms there, but we're going to add a new event registration just to get it into the form to customize it. You could always go through settings as well, but here we are. So the goal is to only show employees that are active. And right now, if she were to click on name, we'd see everyone. So what she's going to do is highlight employee name. When used for data entry, we're going to base it on active employees. And now what you will see, and this is moving very quick, so we can walk through this slower, but we just want to kind of get to the magic trick before we totally describe it. Now we see only Olivia is in there. Right. So the augmentation of this would be this is where we can check if I'm right or wrong. Chelsea, if you go into the settings now and you go to the forms, like overall settings, for example. So you go into settings, you go to forms. This goes back to grid edit. If you were to say, I want to set how different roles use these forms, and that for everyone, I want grid edit to refer to that event registration's main form, which by default it is. Now what we should see is if you go to exit settings, and if you go back to the landing page, the table home page of event registrations, and hop into grid edit, I believe, and this is where we can figure out if I'm on the level or not. Yes, see that, folks? There it is. So employee name is relying on that setting in the form to only show employees where the checkbox is active. It's like magic.
It's also showing this format, I believe, is the record picker format from events as well.
Yep. So it's referring to what you told the form to do. And that means, too, that, you have more than just 3 columns if you want for your record picker, because it's going to refer to whatever columns are selected in the report that you created.
Cool.
Awesome. I hope that was, okay. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I hope that was helpful for the other folks, too. Paul and Donald, you were talking about grid edit. And so I guess I would be curious to know if, one last thing, if you don't mind, Chelsea, if we go to an event itself, so let's head to an actual event record and let's customize the form. What we're going to do is say that we're going to make the event registrations editable. So if you find event registrations in spot 15 and make it editable there, what happens if you hit save when we hit edit on this event? Are we going to see all employees, or are we only going to see Olivia because she's the active employee? So if you hit edit up at the top right, like we're going to edit this record itself, editing the entire event, that's going to take our registrations embedded report and make it grid editable. What happens when you double click? There it is. Ba-boom. Oh, and Donald was, he was saying he wanted to see that too. So there it is. Now, I guess the one thing to keep in mind, a consideration, is that this is an all or nothing approach for grid editing those join records, those intermediary records, right? So if you have multiple purposes for grid editing, you might want to think about roles and multiple forms, and and hashtag there goes my afternoon. I just gave Donald a bunch of extra work or a bunch of extra solutions. I'm not sure. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference when you're deep in the QuickBase machine, but hopefully I've given you something to think about.
Cool. That was my entire evening to last night after the sessions that I went to, Donald. I feel like I had put on demands on my schedule. It's I'm going to send some on demands after the programming ends because I'm on West Coast time. And then I just wanted to build. I wanted to use the things I learned.
It's incredible the rabbit holes you can go down. I'll say the most challenging thing, and it's a good challenge, of being a QuickBase employee is constantly wanting to make my apps better and better while simultaneously having to deal with the fact that I have a job of not just doing QuickBase for myself, but helping other people and teaching. So, endless conflict there.
Cool. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll just point out that on the dashboard of this Empower app, we have our step-by-step instructions for adding an intermediary table and the relationships. So everything that was on my slides is in the app. And then we also have our key takeaways with all the points from throughout the presentation distilled. And then I also have some about this app information, the use case, and description of the tables. But again, if you have any further questions about any of this content, you can reach out to Ben or myself. We're happy to work with you. Oh, was there another question? A Tammy question? We have 1 minute.
Tammy had asked a question, and I think maybe they keep it open for a few minutes, but let's see. I know Tammy had asked a question earlier on, and I'm curious if Tammy is still interested in circling back to that question, or if I'm heaping on too much pressure by calling people out by name. But perhaps not. I suppose in the meantime, I would just mention, you'll be asked how this session was afterward. If you don't mind taking a moment, let us know how we did. I mean, that is feedback for QuickBase, but it's also feedback for Chelsea here too, who really did 99% of the work for this presentation. I was just here to help patch things together. Okay, so Tammy, you need to review first. All right, well, thank you. But yeah, if you have any passion around how this session went, please take a moment. It's a huge favor to us, so I appreciate it, but let us know with the post-session survey what you thought.
Yeah, and also I'm a customer presenter here at Empower. I hear there aren't too many of us. If you're interested in presenting in the future and you have questions, you want to help increase our presentation, I would love to chat with you about how it went for me. I really enjoyed it. You could also reach out to Benjamin or any of the other QuickBase folks, I'm sure. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions about that as well.
That's right. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of Empower. It was great to have you here. So thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for all the engagement, the participation, the great questions. And Chelsea, awesome work here. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you for helping. Now, I guess we'll just hang out in the room. I guess we'll just hang out in the room for a couple of minutes while people filter out in case some last straggler questions or comments come through. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. And thank you to Olivia, our behind-the-scenes producer. Really appreciate your help with everything as well.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. Thanks for not minding us using your name coincidentally there, too, in the example. I think that was totally coincidence, right?
Very much coincidence. I used the random name generator thing.
Yes. Yeah, well, we'll just hang out until we get booted, if that's no problem. So feel free to, okay, here comes the boot. Bye, everybody.
Bye.